Imagine this. You've worked hard, earned your success, and finally decide to enjoy the luxury of first class. You check in, board early, and settle into your seat, to be a prime spot for a smooth flight. But just as you're about to relax, a flight attendant walks over. Her smile is forced, her tone careful. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's been a seating adjustment. You'll need to move." No explanation, no apology, just a command. Now, imagine you're the only black passenger in first class. Would you quietly accept it? Or would you ask why? For Marcus Reynolds, this is more than just a seat. This is a moment of truth. What starts as an inconvenience quickly unravels into something far bigger, a conspiracy hidden in plain sight. By the time this plane lands, powerful forces will be exposed, criminals will fall, and justice will take flight. Buckle up. The real turbulence is about to begin. Before we dive in, let us know, where are you watching from today? Share in the comments and join us on this journey. Let's get started. Marcus Reynolds stepped onto the plane, his polished Italian loafers clicking against the sleek cabin floor. His suit was sharp, his presence commanding. He was a man who had earned his way to first class, not that it should matter. As he approached seat 2B, he sensed the shift in energy, the murmurs, the curious glances. He had felt it before. A blonde flight attendant, her name tag reading Amanda, glanced at him, then at the boarding pass in his hand. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. "Sir, may I see your ticket again?" Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Sure." He handed it over. Amanda examined it for longer than necessary, then frowned. "It seems there's been a mistake." "A mistake? This seat has been reassigned." Marcus arched an eyebrow. "Reassigned? That's interesting, considering I bought this ticket weeks ago." A man seated in 3A, a white-haired executive in an expensive navy blue suit, chuckled softly. "You sure you're in the right cabin, buddy?" he asked, not bothering to hide his smirk. "Maybe you meant to turn left at the door, not right." A few passengers snickered. Marcus inhaled slowly. He had spent his entire life navigating moments like this, microaggressions wrapped in thinly veiled politeness. "Tell me," Marcus said, tilting his head at Amanda, "do you double-check every first-class passenger's ticket, or just the ones who look like me?" Amanda hesitated. "Sir, I assure you, this isn't personal. We just—" Another flight attendant appeared. This one, a man, looked more authoritative. "Mr. Reynolds, we have a high-priority passenger who needs this seat." Marcus folded his arms. "Let me guess. He doesn't look like me either." Amanda flushed. The executive in 3A laughed again. "Come on now," the man said, sipping his champagne. "It's not about race, it's about priority. You don't exactly scream VIP." Marcus turned to face him. "Tell me," Marcus said calmly, "how do you define VIP? Because from where I stand, I see a man who inherited his position, not one who built it." The executive's face darkened. "Watch your mouth, boy." The word boy cut through the air like a blade. For the first time, Marcus' jaw tightened. Amanda stepped in, nervous. "Sir, please. We can offer you a seat in business class at no extra charge." Before Marcus could respond, a new presence entered the cabin. A man, in a dark government-issued suit built like a linebacker, walked in with 2 security officers. A high-ranking official. The cabin fell silent. The flight attendant whispered something into the man's ear. The official's cold blue eyes met Marcus. "This your seat?" the official asked. "It was." The official nodded at Amanda. "Take care of it." And just like that, Marcus was dismissed. But something else caught his attention. A flight attendant hurried over, setting a black leather briefcase on his seat. The seat no one would be sitting in. As Marcus was led toward economy, his mind raced. Why had they taken his seat if no one was sitting there? What was in that briefcase? And why did it feel like losing his seat was only the beginning? Marcus sat stiffly in his cramped economy seat, jaw tight, hands gripping the armrests. He had endured injustice before. But this time, something was different. This wasn't just about race. This was about something much bigger. His eyes locked onto seat 2B, The first-class seat that had been his just minutes ago. The briefcase still sat there. A simple black leather case, unmarked, untouched. Why reserve an empty seat just for a briefcase? A tall, wiry flight attendant leaned in close to the case. He wasn't touching it, just checking. His fingers hovered near the clasps, as if making sure they were still locked. He looked over his shoulder twice, then quickly walked away. Marcus felt it in his gut. Something was off. He pulled out his phone and angled the camera discreetly. Snap. A blurry image of the briefcase appeared on his screen. He quickly attached it to a message and typed, Flight 206. Something suspicious in first class. Keep an eye on the manifest. Sent to FBI Aviation Security. He hit send, slipped the phone into his pocket, and waited. Then suddenly, ding. The seatbelt sign flickered on. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our ascent. Please remain seated. Marcus glanced back at seat 2B. The briefcase was gone. His stomach dropped. Gone. Marcus scanned the aisle. Who took it? He hadn't seen anyone pass through first class. No attendants had moved it, and yet someone had taken it without a sound. His instincts went on high alert. This was no ordinary luggage transfer. This was a handoff. His fingers clenched into a fist. Whatever was in that case, someone wanted badly enough to make a scene to remove him from that seat. Across the aisle, a man in seat 5D adjusted his jacket. He was a stocky, middle-aged guy with a buzz cut, sunglasses still on despite the dim cabin lighting. Marcus watched as he reached down, pulling something from under his seat. Marcus craned his neck slightly. A black leather briefcase. His breath hitched. Was that the same one? Then he noticed something chilling. The man wasn't opening it. Instead, he was securing the locks. Click, click. The man in 5D wasn't checking his luggage. He was making sure no one else could open it. Marcus leaned back into his seat, exhaling slowly. This was planned. A few rows ahead, he spotted two flight attendants whispering. One was Amanda, the same blonde woman who had removed him from first class. The other was the tall, wiry flight attendant who had checked the briefcase. Marcus focused, straining to hear. Make sure it's sealed tight. Relax. We've done this before. The handoff will be clean. Marcus' pulse spiked. Handoff? Done this before? This wasn't a normal first-class service. His eyes flicked back to seat 5D. The man's hands remained on the briefcase, as if guarding it with his life. Marcus knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to sit here and do nothing. This wasn't just about a stolen seat anymore. This was a crime in motion, and he was about to blow it wide open. Marcus kept his breathing steady, but his mind was running at full speed. There was something inside that briefcase worth hiding, something important enough that they had staged an entire scene just to remove him from his first-class seat. Who were they? The crew? The passengers? The government official? His eyes flicked toward seat 5D, where the stocky man with the buzz cut kept his hands firmly on the case. Marcus had seen enough high-stakes business deals to know one thing. When a man clutches something that tightly, it's either worth a fortune or it's dangerous. Maybe both. The plane had now leveled at cruising altitude, the soft hum of the engines masking the low murmurs of conversation. The flight attendants had switched to autopilot, moving routinely through the aisles, smiling at passengers like everything was normal. But it wasn't normal. Marcus forced himself to look away, pretending to scroll through his phone. But out of the corner of his eye, he noticed movement. The man in 5D leaned sideways, his bulky frame shifting as he subtly nudged his briefcase into the aisle, right next to the seat of a man in 6F, a slim, sharp-eyed passenger in a gray suit. Without a single word, 6F reached down and picked it up, slipping it under his own seat. Marcus's stomach tensed. They had just made the switch. A silent exchange, so smooth it had to be practiced. If Marcus had blinked, he would have missed it. This wasn't just some random smuggling operation. This was coordinated, precise. These people had done this before. Marcus pressed the side of his phone, pretending to adjust the volume, but instead, he snapped another photo. This time, he had them. Marcus wasn't just a businessman. He had built his empire from the ground up, and in the process, he had made powerful friends in places others never even thought to look. One of those friends was an FBI aviation security consultant. He pulled up the contact again. Agent Kyle Mercer. Marcus. Sent. Second switch. Just happened. Man in 5D passed a black briefcase to 6F. No words. Just the exchange. First class crew involved. Flight 206. Agent Mercer. Typing, then sent. That's an international trafficking pattern. Stay on it. I'm calling in a check on that flight manifest. Do not intervene yet. Marcus exhaled. So he had been right. Amanda, the blonde flight attendant, made her way toward Marcus's row, a polite but forced smile plastered on her face. "Can I get you something to drink, sir?" she asked. Marcus met her gaze, calm but unshaken. "Water's fine," he said, watching for any sign of hesitation. She nodded, then casually glanced at the man in 6F. A glance too well-timed. She was in on it, and she had just given herself away. Marcus leaned back, maintaining his relaxed posture. They didn't know he was onto them. That was his biggest advantage. But the real question was, what was inside that briefcase? And what would they do if they realized he was watching? Minutes passed. The exchange had been smooth, but now Marcus noticed 6F shifting uncomfortably. He was holding the briefcase like it weighed more than it should, his hands subtly tightening around it. Marcus had seen this kind of behavior before, in men who were carrying something they didn't fully understand. Something dangerous. Then, for the first time, 6F turned his head and locked eyes with Marcus. A long, assessing stare. He knew. He knew Marcus had seen the handoff. The game had just changed. Marcus met 6F's gaze without flinching. The man wasn't just looking at him. He was studying him. Measuring. Calculating. "He knows I saw the exchange." The hum of the airplane engines filled the tense silence between them. Around them, other passengers chatted idly, oblivious to the undercurrent of danger running beneath the surface. Marcus kept his expression neutral. He had two options: look away and pretend he hadn't seen anything, or keep staring and let the man know he wasn't intimidated. He chose the latter. After a few seconds, 6F smirked, not a friendly one, but the kind that said, "You should mind your own business." Then he reached down and casually adjusted the briefcase. A warning. Marcus got the message loud and clear. But instead of backing down, he gave the man a slight, knowing nod. Two can play this game. A shadow passed through the aisle. Amanda, the blonde flight attendant, returned. But this time, she wasn't just serving drinks. She leaned down, whispering something to 6F as she pretended to check on his seatbelt. Marcus's ears strained, barely catching her words. "We land in 3 hours. If there's a problem, deal with it before then." His pulse ticked up. A notch. Deal with it? His mind immediately ran through the possibilities. They could plant something in his bag. They could try to isolate him. Or they could try something far worse. Marcus calmly pulled out his phone, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He wasn't about to tip them off. He typed a message. 6F made me. He knows I saw. Flight crew is involved. Heard them say deal with it before landing. Any ID on these guys? Sent to Agent Kyle Mercer, FBI Aviation Security. Seconds later, his phone vibrated. "Agent Mercer, working on it. Stay alert. If they make a move, don't wait. Do what you have to do." Marcus slid the phone back into his pocket just as 6F stood up. He was coming toward him. The man stopped beside Marcus's seat, placing a casual hand on the overhead bin. "You've been looking over here a lot," 6F said smoothly. His voice was calm, but Marcus could hear the tension beneath it. Marcus looked up, giving him an easy smile. "Long flight. Not much else to look at." 6F chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Right. That's all it is." Marcus tilted his head. "Why? Should it be more than that?" A long pause. Then 6F leaned in slightly. Just enough so that no one else could hear. "You seem like a smart guy," he said softly. "Smart guys don't get involved in things that aren't their problem." Marcus didn't break eye contact. "And yet," he said, voice just as low, "here you are, making it my problem." The man's jaw tightened. Then, with a forced smile, he straightened. "Enjoy your flight." He walked away, back to his seat, but Marcus knew what had just happened. That was a warning, and it meant they were out of time. Marcus knew one thing for sure: if they were going to deal with him before landing, he couldn't wait. He needed to act. Now, he scanned the cabin, searching for his next move. And then, his eyes landed on something. The emergency phone near the flight attendant station. If he could reach it, he could call the cockpit, force the pilot to alert authorities before they landed. But to get there, he'd have to move fast. And he'd have to do it before they stopped him. Marcus kept his breathing steady. Every move mattered now. If he acted too soon, they would know he was onto them. If he waited too long, they might make him disappear before the plane even landed. He glanced toward the emergency phone near the flight attendant station. That was his only chance. If he could reach it, he could alert the cockpit and force them to contact authorities. But he wasn't alone. 6F was watching him. The flight attendants were keeping an eye on him, too. They knew he had seen something. And if they had already planned to deal with him, he had no doubt they would make it look like an accident. He needed a distraction. Marcus looked around the cabin. A young woman across the aisle was holding a glass of red wine. A flight attendant carrying a tray of drinks was passing right by her. Perfect. Marcus shifted his foot slightly. Then, just as the flight attendant walked past, he kicked his foot out. The flight attendant stumbled. The tray tipped. Wine splashed all over the woman's white blouse. She gasped. "Are you kidding me?" The entire section turned to look. Passengers whispered. Flight attendants rushed over, trying to clean up the mess. For 5 seconds, everyone was focused on the spill. That was all Marcus needed. He slipped out of his seat and moved toward the phone. 20 feet. The flight attendants were still distracted. 10 feet. His heart pounded. 5 feet. Then, "Sir, can I help you?" Marcus froze. The tall, wiry flight attendant was standing right in front of him. His eyes were sharp, suspicious. Marcus forced a smile. "Yeah, just stretching my legs. Long flight, you know." The attendant didn't move. First-class passengers usually stay in their section. Marcus shrugged. "Not my seat anymore, remember?" Then, without warning, he grabbed the emergency phone. The flight attendant's eyes widened. Marcus hit the call button. A static noise. "This is the cockpit." "Who's calling?" Marcus spoke fast. "This is Marcus Reynolds, passenger in economy. There is a security threat on board. I need you to contact authorities immediately." A pause. "What kind of threat?" Marcus flicked his eyes toward seat 6F. The man was already standing. Black briefcase. Smuggling operation. Flight crew involved. FBI tracking the manifest. If you don't act now, you're going to land into a crime scene. Another pause. "Understood. Stay where you are." Click. The call ended. Marcus slowly lowered the phone. He had done it. But when he turned around, 6F was right there. And he was smiling. "That was a mistake," 6F said quietly. Marcus glanced toward the front of the plane. 2 flight attendants stepped into the aisle, blocking the way. Behind him, the curtain to first class slid shut. Passengers kept chatting, completely unaware that Marcus was now trapped. He had forced their hand. Now, they were going to make their move. And there was nowhere left to run. Marcus stood still, his mind working fast. He had made the call. The cockpit knew. FBI was tracking the manifest. But now he was trapped. 6F stood in front of him, blocking his way. 2 flight attendants positioned themselves near the aisles, cutting off his escape. Behind him, the curtain to first class was shut. Passengers around them were still talking, completely unaware of what was happening. Marcus met 6F's gaze. "You should have stayed in your seat," the man said, his voice calm but firm. Marcus smiled slightly. "And miss all this excitement." 6F didn't react. He just tilted his head slightly, a signal. The wiry male flight attendant moved first. His hand shot forward, grabbing Marcus's wrist. Marcus acted on instinct. He twisted sharply, breaking the grip, then stepped back. For a split second, the flight attendant looked shocked. He wasn't expecting resistance. Neither was 6F. But Marcus wasn't done. He lunged forward, knocking over a tray of drinks. Glass shattered. Ice skidded across the floor. Passengers gasped, turning to look. The brief moment of chaos gave Marcus exactly what he needed, a chance to move. Marcus turned toward the aisle, pushing past a startled passenger. The first flight attendant grabbed for him again, but Marcus ducked, shoving past another row. "Sir," another crew member shouted, "you need to calm down." Marcus ignored her. Calm? They were trying to silence him. He needed to get to the cockpit. He needed a witness. Ahead, an older man with glasses, a doctor, judging by the emblem on his bag, was watching the scene unfold. His face was full of concern. Marcus locked eyes with him. "Doctor," Marcus said quickly, "watch them. They're trying to take me." The man hesitated, then nodded. A potential ally. But Marcus didn't have time to say more. A strong arm wrapped around his shoulder. 6F had caught up. "Enough," the man muttered, tightening his grip. Marcus elbowed him hard in the ribs. 6F grunted, loosening his hold just enough. Marcus twisted free, but then someone else grabbed him. A new voice entered the mix. "Sir, you need to sit down." Marcus turned. A second passenger, a younger man in a business suit, was stepping between him and 6F. The guy thought Marcus was the problem. The crew had played it perfectly. They didn't attack him openly. They made it look like he was the one causing trouble. And now, other passengers were looking at him like he was dangerous. If he fought back any harder, they'd restrain him. If he stopped moving, he'd be at their mercy. He was out of options. Marcus lifted his hand slowly, showing no aggression. "Fine," he said. "I'll sit." 6F narrowed his eyes, suspicious. "Good choice." Marcus stepped back toward a seat. But at the last second, he turned sharply and grabbed a nearby passenger's phone. Before anyone could react, he held it up high and spoke loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. "Listen to me. There's a smuggling operation happening on this plane. This crew is involved. I already called the cockpit. Authorities are waiting for us on the ground." Passengers froze. For the first time, the crew looked nervous. They had wanted to control the narrative. Now, everyone was watching. Marcus had just made it impossible for them to act without drawing attention. But that didn't mean they wouldn't try. Now, it was a race against time. For the first time since this began, Marcus was no longer alone. Passengers sat frozen, their eyes darting between him and the crew. He had just thrown a bomb into their perfect plan. He still held the phone high, his voice cutting through the cabin. "This flight is part of a smuggling operation. The crew is involved. The authorities are already waiting for us on the ground." Murmurs rippled through the rows. Some passengers whispered to each other. Others stared at the crew, doubt creeping into their faces. The crew had counted on silence and control. Now, everyone was watching. And that changed everything. Amanda, the blonde flight attendant, was the first to react. She stepped forward, forcing a calm, professional smile. "Sir, you need to return to your seat. You're causing a disruption." Marcus gave a short laugh. "A disruption? You mean like stealing my seat and handing it to a smuggling ring?" Passengers gasped. Some of them shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure who to believe. Amanda's smile didn't falter. But Marcus saw the flicker of irritation in her eyes. "We'll discuss any complaints after we land," she said smoothly. "For now, I need you to comply with crew instructions." It was a trap. If he sat down now, they could isolate him, make him look like an unruly passenger. They might even have some backup excuse planned, say he was acting aggressive, get the other passengers to turn against him. They needed to shut him up before landing. But Marcus wasn't done yet. He turned, pointing directly at seat 6F. "You, get up." 6F, the man who had taken the briefcase, didn't move. "Open that case," Marcus demanded. "Right now. If you're not hiding anything, prove it." All eyes turned to 6F. His fingers tightened on the armrest. Amanda stepped in fast. "Sir, stop harassing passengers. Why is the crew protecting him?" Marcus cut in, his voice loud enough for the entire cabin. Passengers muttered. A few people leaned forward, watching. A man in row 7, a businessman in a gray suit, spoke up. "Yeah. Why not open the case? If he's innocent, just show us what's inside." Another voice. A woman near the window. "I don't like this. Why are they shutting him up instead of answering his questions?" The crew was losing control. Marcus saw at the moment 6F realized it. His cover was broken. And then 6F moved. His hand darted toward the briefcase. Marcus saw the tension in his shoulders. Not to open it, to grab something. A weapon? A burner phone? A failsafe? Marcus didn't wait to find out. He lunged. Crash. The briefcase hit the floor. The lock snapped open. Passengers gasped. And then Marcus saw it. Stacks of unmarked currency. A small black pouch filled with vials. And beneath it, a gun. A woman screamed. Passengers jumped up, pushing back in their seats. 6F grabbed for the gun. Marcus kicked the briefcase hard, sending it skidding under the seats. 6F lunged for him instead. A fist flew. Marcus ducked, grabbing the man's wrist, twisting. A sharp crack. 6F cried out. Passengers were shouting. Someone hit the call button repeatedly, summoning the cockpit. Amanda, the flight attendant, reached for her radio, probably calling for backup. Marcus shoved 6F backward, sending him crashing into a seat. Somebody grabbed the case. Marcus yelled. A man in row 8, the doctor, dug down and yanked the briefcase closer. The cockpit door opened. A co-pilot stepped out, confused. "What the hell is going on out here?" Passengers pointed. "That guy had a gun." The flight crew was covering for him. They tried to shut that man up. The tide had turned. The crew had lost control. And now there was nowhere left to hide. The cabin was in chaos. Passengers shouted over each other, some still trying to piece together what had just happened. Marcus stood firm, chest rising and falling, his muscles tense from the struggle. Across from him, 6F was hunched over, gripping his injured wrist, eyes burning with rage. But it wasn't over. Not yet. The co-pilot, a young man with sharp features and wide, panicked eyes, stood frozen at the entrance of the cockpit. He had just walked into a war zone. "Someone tell me what the hell is going on," he demanded. Marcus pointed to the briefcase, now secured under the doctor's foot in row 8. "Your first-class crew was covering for a smuggler. That case has illegal cash, unknown vials, and a gun." Passengers gasped. The co-pilot's eyes flicked to the flight attendants. Amanda straightened her posture, her face carefully neutral. "Sir, this passenger is causing a disruption." "No," a woman near the window snapped. "We saw what happened. They tried to shut him up." Others chimed in. They took a seat and staged the whole thing. They were passing the case between passengers. The co-pilot hesitated. His instincts told him something was wrong. Then 6F made his move. In a flash, 6F lunged toward the briefcase. He was fast, but Marcus was faster. Marcus tackled him mid-motion. They slammed against the seats. A flight attendant screamed. The gun inside the briefcase skidded out onto the floor. Passengers scrambled away in terror. And then bang. Not a gunshot. A fist. Marcus delivered a brutal right hook to 6F's jaw, sending him crashing into the aisle. Blood dripped from a man's lip as he groaned, dazed. Now there was no doubt. 6F was beaten. But the fight wasn't over. Marcus turned just in time to see Amanda reaching for something behind the service cart. Her hand wrapped around a taser. Marcus moved, but he was too far. Zap. The taser went off, but not at Marcus. The doctor in row 8 had tackled her. The taser went wild, sparking against the cart. Passengers cheered. Amanda was pinned. 6F was down. And now the co-pilot had seen enough. The co-pilot grabbed the intercom. His voice echoed through the speakers. "This is your first officer. The aircraft is now under lockdown. All passengers remain seated. Authorities have been contacted. Any attempt to interfere with this flight will be treated as a direct threat. Amanda's face drained of color. 6F stopped struggling. They had lost. Marcus exhaled, finally feeling the weight of the situation. He turned to the passengers. "You all saw what happened," he said. "You know the truth. When we land, you need to make sure they don't twist this story." People nodded. Some even murmured words of support. The doctor offered his hand. "That was damn impressive," he said. Marcus shook it. "I just wanted my seat back." The doctor laughed. "Well, you ended up taking down an entire smuggling ring instead." Marcus smirked, looking down at the unconscious 6F. "Not bad for a coach passenger, huh?" The co-pilot locked the cockpit door again. "Sit tight," he said. "We land in 20 minutes." The plane descended, and Marcus knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about a stolen seat anymore. This was justice. The cabin had fallen into a tense silence. The fight was over, but the battle wasn't won yet. Marcus sat in his seat, muscles still coiled with adrenaline. Across the aisle, 6F was slumped against the cabin wall, breathing heavily, his hands zip-tied behind his back. The doctor had done the honors, using a spare medical band to secure him after the struggle. A few rows up, Amanda sat frozen, her eyes darting to the other flight attendants. None of them moved to help her. They knew it was over. Marcus glanced out the window. The plane had begun its descent. The co-pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our final approach. Law enforcement is waiting at the gate. Please remain seated." Passengers stirred. Murmurs spread. Some pulled out their phones, no doubt preparing to record what happened when they landed. The crew had counted on secrecy. Now, the whole plane was watching. Marcus looked down at the briefcase resting under the doctor's seat. Inside was the truth. Bundles of unmarked cash. A small pouch of mysterious vials that no one had dared to open. And a gun. How many times had they done this before? How many times had people like Marcus been removed from first class to make room for something illegal? He clenched his fists. Not this time. Amanda suddenly leaned forward. Her voice was quiet, but her eyes were sharp. "Listen," she whispered to Marcus. "You don't understand what you're getting involved in." Marcus didn't react. "You think this is just a smuggling ring?" she continued. "You have no idea who you're crossing. You think the FBI is going to protect you." Her tone had changed. No more fake politeness. No more forced smiles. This was a warning. "You should forget what you saw," she said. "For your own good." Marcus turned his head slowly and met her gaze. "Funny," he said. "That's exactly what they told me when they kicked me out of my seat." Amanda's jaw clenched. "You think you won," she muttered. "You think this ends when we land." Marcus just smiled. "It does for you." She didn't say another word. The runway came into view. The plane touched down smoothly, tires screeching against the pavement. A collective exhale filled the cabin. Then red and blue lights flashed outside. Police cars. Black SUVs. FBI agents in tactical gear. Passengers pressed against the windows, gasping. The reality of the situation hit all at once. They weren't just watching the end of a fight. They were watching a takedown. A flight attendant's voice wavered through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated as authorities board the aircraft." Marcus straightened his tie. Showtime. The cabin was deathly silent. Outside, red and blue lights flashed against the windows, casting eerie shadows across the plane. The reality of the moment had fully settled in. This wasn't just another landing. This was an arrest. Marcus sat still, watching, waiting. Then, a loud knock on the aircraft door. The co-pilot stood up, hesitated for only a moment, then opened it. FBI agents flooded the jet bridge. Passengers whispered nervously, craning their necks to see. A tall man in a dark suit, clearly in charge, stepped forward first, flashing a badge. "Agent Kyle Mercer, FBI Aviation Security," he announced. "Everyone stay seated." Marcus exhaled. Finally, Agent Mercer scanned the cabin, then locked eyes with Marcus. A silent understanding passed between them. Then he turned to the co-pilot. "I need to speak to your captain. Now." The co-pilot nodded and hurried into the cockpit. Mercer's team moved fast. Row 6, Seat F, one of the agents called out. 6F, the injured smuggler barely had time to react. 3 agents swarmed him, yanking him out of his seat and pinning him against the overhead bins. Passengers flinched as the man let out a low, pained grunt. "You have the right to remain silent," an agent recited as he cuffed him. "But judging by what we found in that case, I doubt that'll help you." Marcus smirked. That case had been the nail in their coffin. Next, the flight attendants. Amanda tried to play innocent. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said, standing up slowly. "I was just following orders." Agent Mercer didn't even blink. "Following orders to aid a smuggling ring?" he asked. "Because that's what it looks like from where I'm standing." "I had no choice," she insisted. Save it for your lawyer." An agent pulled out zip ties. Amanda's mask of composure finally cracked. Passengers gasped as she was turned around and restrained. Meanwhile, the wiry male flight attendant, the one who had grabbed Marcus, had gone pale. He didn't resist as the FBI dragged him out of his seat. "You don't understand," he muttered. "You're messing with something bigger than you." Agent Mercer raised an eyebrow. "I think we understand just fine." The businessman in row 7, the same one who had challenged the crew earlier, spoke up. "I saw everything," he said. "They tried to shut this man up," he pointed to Marcus, "and when that didn't work, they tried to turn the passengers against him." Other voices joined in. "Yeah, we saw it too. He told us what was happening, and they tried to make him look like the problem." Agent Mercer nodded, then turned to Marcus. "You did good," he said simply. Marcus just shrugged. "I just wanted my seat back." The agent chuckled. "Well, you also just helped take down an international smuggling ring." One by one, the smugglers and their crew were escorted off the plane. As Amanda was led past Marcus, she paused. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something. Maybe a warning. Maybe an apology. But she said nothing. She just lowered her head and kept walking. Passengers were finally allowed to stand. Some stretched, others grabbed their bags, still in shock. The doctor from row 8 clapped Marcus on the back. "You need a drink after that." Marcus chuckled. "Or a whole bottle." The businessman from row 7 held out a hand. "You did the right thing." Marcus shook it. "So did you." As he grabbed his bag, his phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "They won't forget this. Be careful." Marcus stared at the screen. His gut told him this wasn't over. But for now he smiled, put his phone away, and walked off the plane. Because today, justice had landed first. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next thrilling adventure. Your support helps bring more exciting stories to life. Where are you watching from today? Share in the comments and join us as we journey through this story together. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.